been thinking about, like becoming aware of your work, becoming aware of the podcast, becoming aware of the channel, and just little by little tracking your progress and becoming a fan.
Thanks, man.
And then getting to work with you since you moved from Indy and have been crushing it in Colorado. I don't know, that set the tone for the day, like gratitude and appreciation for being here.
Well, I appreciate that. And it goes both ways for sure. I left Thomas Falds, who is the Ableton brand manager where I was, and you adopted me. So thank you for bringing me into the Wild West in Colorado. Yeah, it's been a great transition. It was a crazy move, but I'm thankful to work with you and have gotten to know you pretty well over the last couple of years. And I love having my friends on the podcast because it's so much more chilled and laid back. I feel like I've gotten to know you much better. Actually, I think you were probably part of the reason why I moved to Colorado, whether you realize it or not, because I was invited to the Ableton user group in Denver, 2021 maybe. And you guys invited me to come out and speak for that. And I kind of fell in love with the city and just kind of felt like home, just like hanging out with a bunch of other Ableton nerds and just the family. And it was just a really good vibe. And I was like, I could see myself really living here. And I was already kind of thinking about moving at that point. So I credit you, partial credit for where I'm at now. And it's a good thing.
I'll take it, man. I just hope your parents don't hate me.
Nah, yeah, I do miss like the free meals because I lived pretty close to them back in the day and stuff. But nah, it's like I still go back for holidays. It's a good amount of distance.
Nice. Well, going back to that event, the Ableton event that you were at in Denver was a user group event, and it was the first in-person user group event since the lockdowns.
Yeah.
So I think it might have even been possibly 2022.
I think it was 21. I don't think it was 20.
It was
I think
definitely
so.
21? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first trip to Denver, actually. So it was my first trip to Denver as a brand manager.
Oh, sweet.
And it was my first time participating at a Denver user group. And it was a nice surprise because then all of a sudden, like, hey, look, Dan's here. And I got to meet you. And of course, I think you talked about the feeling at home. The Denver user group is really good about showing hospitality, and the Denver community in general, I think, knows how to make people feel welcome. But I think that's also something that I felt as an Ableton user when I would attend Ableton events. And that's something that I really try to keep an eye on as a Ableton brand manager now, is making sure that people feel welcome and people feel like they get a chance to be part of the fun. And it was great that you, like, I don't think we gave you any heads up. You just kind of had a one thing ready to go.
There was a little, I think I knew like a week or two before I showed up. But yeah, dude, 100%. It is that like community. Everybody's like there just to grow and encourage each other. And I think every time I've been around you or have seen you doing user group events, like you definitely encourage that vibe. And you're the kind of guy where it's like, I feel like the first time we hung out or I met you, I felt like I knew you for a while just because you're that like warm, just like friendly, nice guy that like, I don't know, I feel like in a past life we were friends or something. Like you just have that very hospitable, friendly nature about you. That's one thing I love about all the brand managers, to be honest, with Ableton. Like everybody I've met that works with the company is just really good, nice, like hospitable people. So, and I think that definitely feeds through the company culture and the events that Ableton puts on with Loop and other things, and just encouraging that music producer, music educator community for sure. Yeah, props to you, man.
Thanks, Dan. That's really kind of you to say. We were talking about topics for the conversation today in prep and my background. And I think that really has influenced me, is the fact that I didn't have access to music education, music programs, or even music information when I was coming up. I was lucky that it was early internet times and I could find guitar tabs and bass tabs online and, would have to print them still and learn them and stuff. But I'd like to be the person that I would have loved to run into when I was learning music or when I was starting to get involved in a music community. And I think that really has shaped what I do for a living in Ableton, but also outside, just helping people as an educator or a certified trainer before that. I think there's a real rush and sense of pride that I get when I see somebody almost get there and I can contribute a tiny part and be witness to them connecting all the dots and finally getting to that place, that sensation of accomplishment. It's a privilege to be a part of, and I'm sure you feel it all the time too.
Yeah, when you see that aha moment light up in a student's eyes or something, like you're like, this is a good feeling. Good karma all around for everybody, just helping other people and letting them get to that next level of what it is they're trying to do. I don't know about you, but like when I first opened Ableton Live, it took me like a full day just to figure out how to get sound out of it. I was like, what is this monster? I'm trying to figure out like this crazy routing, and it turned out to be a lot more simple than I was making it. But how did you get introduced to live? Like with your musical journey, I want people to get to know you a little bit better. Obviously, this is your episode. So like maybe explain some of your music background leading up to that point.
My music background has been me cobbling together what I can get my hands on. Like, I know I've always been drawn to sound and things that make sound and things that can control sound. But again, I never really had access to a formal music education or a clear path to what a career in music or a life in music really looked like, aside from like maybe playing in a cover band at a bar or something, which is what all I saw in my hometown. And aside from that, there was just like making it, right? And it was still like mid 90s in high school when there was just make it or you didn't make it, which is you didn't want to be on the didn't
Yeah.
make it side. So I was really lucky to be alive and make and trying to learn about music at that time, because as I mentioned, at least tabs became available and early internet resources where you could have an informal approach to learning and learn at your own pace. And it's also the age-old story of learning music with your friends, your high school friends, and everybody picks an instrument. And I remember my friend Louis got stuck with the bass even though he wanted to play drums, but he took it like a champ and he knew we needed a bass player. But every break that we had, Louis would jump behind those drums and like really, really crush it.
I wonder if parents had something to do with that, because I don't know too many parents that want their kids to be playing acoustic drums in their home.
Well, that's another thing. Like, always am grateful to parents in my life, like Louis' parents, exactly like precisely them. Like, they would let us go to their house every weekend and set up our crappy little lunchbox amps, and like everything was probably out of tune. We would get all sorts of crazy adapters so we could plug a microphone cable into the back of his parents' sound system,
Nice.
like their hi-fi system, and just probably destroyed those
Yeah.
speakers very early on. But they were always really nice and welcoming. And I remember my friend Mike's mom. Mike wasn't even in the band with us. She just really liked music, so she would let us all set up in her garage.
Shout out to Mike's mom.
Shout out to Mike's mom and all of the Mike's moms out there that are still putting up with that.
That's
It's
right.
such a formative time, right? And having
Yeah.
that support and not receiving criticism from anybody other than encouragement, like, that's really cool that you guys are out here playing. And then she'd go do her thing and come back a few hours later and check in on us.
That's great. My mom bought earplugs for the entire family the day of Christmas when I got my first drum set. She's like, we're all going to suffer together, but we want to encourage this. So yeah, so you grew up playing like a variety of different instruments, didn't you?
Yeah, my first one was guitar. I was really drawn to guitar. And I remember walking over to the music store that was like 2 blocks from my house. I grew up in Mexico, right on the border. So I had this like really mixed experience where I would, live in Mexico, and that's where my parents and I lived, but would go to school in Texas. After buying my like electric guitar and my amp, every time I'd go to Louis' house, I'd have to basically cross a border.
Oh, wow.
It was like an international trip just to go over to a friend's house.
That's dedication.
Yeah, and it sounds more dramatic than it is. It's like a 15-minute drive, very, very close to each other. But it was fun. I ended up having to like travel with papers so that when I came back to Mexico, I wouldn't have to pay taxes on it every time, because they would just, assume that it was new and I was importing an amp every time.
Yeah.
That was my entry into what I really think is my love and my interest is sound, and how to make sounds and where sounds come from and the stories behind them. I've got a parlor guitar that I just took off the steel strings one day and tried nylons and just to see if the action would work. And it sounds beautifully. It sounds like a big ukulele, which is nice. Like, it fills in the space of most mixes really nice and like warmly. But when I was 13, I didn't want to sound, all the stuff that I could reference with nylon strings was like mariachi music and traditional folk music. And it really wasn't what my adrenaline fueled, testosterone fueled young self needed to express himself. I needed
Yeah.
distortion. I needed, feedback and like lots of amplification.
Have you ever run nylon guitar through an amp before?
Oh yeah, that was the first thing I did when I got a distortion pedal, was run that
A
nylon.
really unique
And I
sound
mean,
for sure.
yeah, I mean, if you like, I think a better result can be achieved if you record a really nice nylon guitar and then process it in
Yeah.
post and get some dirt on it or something, and you can get some really interesting sounds there. And also, especially if you think about the recording process, if you get like a really dry recording before you process it, you can get like very percussive thuds with your thumb and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Do you know Andy McKee?
I don't think I do.
He's like one of my favorite guitar players of all time. He actually was the touring guitarist with Prince. And I got to see him perform in front of like 12 people at some hole in the wall club. And it was one of my favorite performances I've ever seen. There was no production, no lights, nothing. It was just him and a guitar. And he would tune, like, he would change out probably 5 or 6 guitars throughout his set. And he would like tune them. I don't know if he just didn't do it before he played, but he would tune them while he was talking, but he was playing them while he was tuning. And it literally sounded like the most musical thing. It was like almost a part of the show. And he's like one of the best guitarists I've ever seen. He became like a YouTube celebrity, I think, is how Prince found him and picked him up. But yeah, you go look at Andy McKee. He's an incredible acoustic guitar player. He's mind blowing. But anyway.
All right, we're going to pause the podcast for a minute. I'm going to take a deep dive into Andy
Yeah,
McKee.
you really should, honestly. He's like one of my favorites. He's got funny stories too about being on tour with Prince.
Did you start with guitar too?
No, I started learning guitar after I tore my ACL when I fell out of a wheelchair going about 40 miles an hour because we tied it to the back of my car and I couldn't do anything. This was in college. I was dumb. And I like messed up my ACL, so I couldn't walk or do anything for like 2.5, 3 months. So I just picked up guitar and taught myself during that time and fell in love with it.
Were you already in that wheelchair because of an accident?
No.
Or was it a stunt and then it was just an ironic result?
And got a wheelchair out of a church. And unfortunately, the wheelchair was never the same after that. But anyway, that's a whole different story. Yeah, I grew up playing drums. So I learned guitar through that experience because I couldn't go anywhere or do anything for a while. But anyway, so like at what point did Ableton Live become a part of your life? How did you discover that as you were growing up playing guitar and playing instruments and with the band?
Yeah, I went through this period. And I think it happened to a lot of people around that time. I don't know if it's like a stage in somebody's life or musician's life, or that time period where technology was making it possible for you to make music by yourself. But I really went down that rabbit hole of I'm a one-man band, or I don't really need people to make music anymore. And it's really hard to even explain to people now, but it was a revolution in recording. Like the way you use the computer before had nothing to do with creativity, and all of a sudden they weren't super reliable, but you could take risks, make all of your music and create on your like college Dell laptop. And that was pretty incredible. Like just, before that, I could only dream of somehow financing a studio session or like under the right conditions. And then that takes you back to the whole discover myth, or like discover system of like people waiting to be discovered and putting a lot of effort into that. And I knew I didn't want to put my energy into that, into like somebody else's hands.
Yeah.
So home recording became my obsession. And I did use several DAWs before. Live Cakewalk was one that caused a lot of headaches, but I learned a lot using Cakewalk. Then FL, and I would export stuff from FL. I would print in FL and bring it to Cakewalk because I could not figure out how to use MIDI at all in Cakewalk.
Yeah.
And then I bought a Mackie mixer, and Mackie had their own proprietary DAW for a while. It may still be around. I think it was called Traction.
I didn't know that.
Traction, yeah. And it was very straightforward for tracking, which is what I was doing. I didn't understand MIDI workflows outside of FL, and I just wanted to record guitar, vocals, and then, drums and all the traditional like rock band instruments. I remember somebody hooked me up with a copy of Live. I think it was Live 6. I really can't remember if it was that or 7.
What do you mean? What do you mean they hooked you up with a copy, Alberto? What does that mean?
A friend had a copy.
Is this a free extended trial, or was this a legal purchase?
I can't remember. Well, actually, this is, and I've shared this in my hiring process at Ableton. I don't know. It's the reality of it. I had a cracked version that I bought at a market in Mexico.
That's amazing. Black market live.
Yeah, Black Market Live, and that was my friend. I instantly, like, just so that it made sense for me, I made friends with the vendor so that I could say that a friend hooked me up, and I had a much cooler
That
story.
sounds so much more legit. A friend hooked me up.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that out of me, because that is the truth. And I'm always on the edge of whether or not it's appropriate because it's
Right.
my job to mention that. But it is a reality that I deal with. And this is, I think, the cool part of the story is that I fell in love with live instantly. It just clicked. It made sense because I wanted to make music by myself with myself. So I wanted to be able to cross-pollinate my ideas. So when it first opened in Session View, it just took a couple of random clicks to know that, this is how I create a clip. This clip isn't making any sound. There's a sounds section in this really conveniently placed browser. And just experimentation and adding effects. And again, going back to signal processing, which is my first love, you look at device view at the bottom and you constantly keep device view in there, and it creates this awareness of the signal chain as part of the musical process, as part of the instrument. So I used it for a few months, felt a bunch of breakthroughs. And before I started using it, I felt like I was stuck in a rut using Traction and I'll just say other DAWs because I don't want to come across as biased. I do work for Ableton, but this conversation sort of outside of that realm as me as a user. I would like to, sort of hope that that's my intention and I'm not like advocating for the product, but it really was love at first sight for me. Night and day from just like linear recording. And I had all these little breakthroughs, things that I'd never really understood in MIDI, things I hadn't understood in signal processing, and sounds that I had in my head that I couldn't execute because I had limited hardware. At the end of the day, back then, if you were like traditional recording in DAWs, like still linear recording, you either needed a lot of cool instruments or external processing still. The processing, in my opinion, just wasn't there. But in live, all the devices really felt like I had stomp boxes and they made sense to me. Like, the layout feels like you're laying out your signal chain on your pedal board. Anyway, I've made a few projects and I got a very kindly worded message pop up one day. I wish I took a screenshot. It said something like, "We realize you're using an unauthorized license. And like, we're sorry, but you can't anymore."
Wow.
So I just locked my version of live, and it was a game changer for me because I was faced with a decision. I'd never had to make a significant purchase in music. Like I had secondhand guitars and I'd buy used pedals and had like ratty instruments. And all of a sudden, I didn't want to go back to intro or standard. I had tasted sweet and I really enjoyed all the suite of instruments.
Sweet nectar of live.
the sweet nectar. I was working as an elementary teacher. I was teaching third grade at the time. And I remember using my teacher, but we'd get like a bonus every year. And, you usually save it to pay off your credit card or something. Like, I guess I'm using it to buy sweet. But right before that, I had the crossroads that I mentioned was, do I buy Pro Tools? Because everybody says buy Pro Tools. It was 2007 or 6. And that was the legit path, right? Like if you want to make your career in the audio industry, you better start learning this DAW. It was sort of the same price. Like I could have gotten a version of Pro Tools for that same amount, but something kept reminding me of the feeling that I had in using that crack trial live. So it was really a no-brainer to take this alternate path, which I do not regret for 1 second because I'm sitting here in front of you because of that making that decision.
Yeah. My feeling, I obviously try to do everything I can to support companies that I love and that I'm using their products. My feeling in the past when I was using cracked stuff is if I like it, if there's no free trial, then maybe I'll get the crack. And if I do love it, I buy it. How do you know you're going to like it if you can't try it? That's kind of been my stance. It's like, if I'm going to use it, I'm going to pay for it because I want to support the developers. I want to support the company.
Now, putting back my Ableton employee hat on, it brings me great pride that it's such an undeniable product that it converted me. And then I know if people do get their hands on it through a friend or through a market in Mexico, it was burnt on a DVD-R. You
Oh
remember
yeah,
those?
man.
Yeah, serial number written on the DVD-R. Like, yeah, there's a product that is so undeniable that it makes people question the value of and how they're using it and
Mhm.
misusing it. So regardless, I don't know like where people get cracks from now and how easy or hard they are to
Yeah.
get, but eventually those cracks run into a brick wall, or if you want to start taking them to live performance
Yeah, that's
environments and
dangerous.
you really want to have control of your set, it's
Yeah,
very
no thanks.
dangerous. That's like the funny thing about the cracked version and like where it leads is you kind of like are making music in the
Mhm.
shadows. And when I ended up buying my version of Live, I remember this sense of pride of I used my money to invest in
Yeah.
my future, which leads me to my next point, which is that's how I became good at it. I was such a cheapskate, and I spent my teacher bonus that I could have used to travel all summer on buying the
Yeah.
software. So I started taking super deep dives into the manual and any YouTube content I could find back in the day.
Well, it sounds like that was a good move and a good decision because obviously you're, a brand manager now and you've had some really cool artists that you've worked with. I know with your almost kind of like a collective musical guest is kind of your brainchild that you started and you use that as your platform for training and teaching and artist upbringing. I know you've worked with like LP Giobbi. She was on the podcast. She's killing it in the house piano music world and a lot of other people like Caroline Rose and Mama Duke, some other cool artists that I like. So yeah, glad that you stuck with the whole Ableton Live world and bought an actual legit trial or version. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Getting to that point, there's this in between period of getting live, learning it, and just really wanting to understand and how I can get the most out of it. And that led me to finding people like Dan
Yeah,
Freeman
Dan.
and I'm dead naming, but Afro DJ Mac,
Yeah,
Brian
Brian
Funk,
Funk.
Laura Escuday, and like Vespers. Like for me, early content creators that were sharing. It felt like they weren't, tutorials back then. They were a little different. They felt like people were sharing their excitement and their discoveries. I think now we've really like honed down an efficient tutorial can look and like as a delivery system for information, and we've come a long way. It's like so night and day from early like naive
Yeah.
tutorials. But I remember that sensation of people getting on camera also for the first time and putting out a signal into the world and saying, I'm doing this with this
Yeah.
software, you can too. And then seeing them do really interesting things like helping artists, setting up audio
Hmm.
installations, working for
Yeah.
universities, like all of these little big landmark things that happened to people that I don't know. I'll say it because I'm a member of that community myself, but I think for a while we were on the fringe. We were not this. We weren't using the standard software. We were using this other
Mm-hmm.
software that the industry maybe didn't really fully understand, and it was definitely very pigeonholed into the electronic music. I don't even think hip hop back then. If you mention live, people would think of Europe, and they would think of music that you would hear in a
Yeah.
club. Little did they know that it had so much potential to take any type of idea in a live setting, and then just like any other DAW, you can write any type of music on it too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, well, and I think that also speaks to how much the company Ableton is continuing to drive innovation with live because I mean, it originally started as just session view, right? And then eventually built out arrangement view and then eventually started allowing you to have more tracks and all these new devices and new instruments that they're rolling out and new features and actually listening to the users. Yeah, that's been just from the people I know when I've seen, it seems like that's kind of been the case. I mean, it's definitely grown a lot and continuing to grow.
I'll say this: when I did meet people in the Ableton community for the first time in person, it was Loop 2016
Hmm.
in Berlin. And I was shocked that most of the presentations there had nothing to do with live. and some people were using Logic for their presentations. And I say that to refer back to our earlier part of the conversation of feeling welcome, and that it really is about making music. And it really pisses me off how divisive DAWs can be nowadays, as opposed to just let's just make music together, right? We can all print whatever we're working on and share it with each other. I mean, I guess it could be seen as an inconvenience, but so could anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's been really cool to be able to just sit on a laptop and make a track and have endless tools at your disposal. Like, I think if you were to time travel like 20 years ago and just hand a laptop with Live on it, Live 11 Suite, somebody'd be like, wait, you mean I can actually play a realistic sounding guitar on a computer without a guitar? Like, their minds would be blown, which is just really crazy to think about how fast innovation has happened just in the last 15 to 20 years as far as music recording technology. It's like, it makes you wonder, okay, so we look at the last 15 years and how fast it's advanced. Like, what's the next 15 years going to look like, right? It's really interesting.
Yeah, think about that all the time. And part of me has this dream where like 2 generations from now, people are just gonna completely disconnect and go back to making music in person, like old-fashioned ways. Like even still using electronic instruments, but like figuring out ways to take everything off grid and make music together, and figuring out ways to just see everything as an instrument. Because I think we're at that hump, right, where we've always referred to live as an instrument. And I've always felt like it was my instrument. When people ask me what I play, that's where I feel I'm the most comfortable in coming up with an idea on the fly that can either collaborate with what's happening in the room, or it can be the beginning or the continuation of an actual composition. I wonder what that's going to be like on the other side of that hump. Once it's just assumed that all of these DAWs are instruments, and people have these fields of studies, and you can become like a professional at using these instruments to express yourself.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there's something nostalgic. I mean, you look at just fashion, right? There, like this, I feel like the 70s and 80s fashion is really hot right now. Everything kind of goes back to history. I mean, you look at tape machines. We now have software that's trying to emulate the sound of old tape because that is a sound, right? That's interesting.
I think something else I realized at a Loop event, it was a year where artificial intelligence and machine learning was like really bright. I think when I've been 17 or 16, a lot of demos and a lot of people very excited to share about artificial intelligence. So it was the topic of conversation. And I remember just seeing this traditional African band. I can't remember their name, but they were comprised of musicians from different parts of Africa touched by the Nile River. So that was the connective tissue of that band. And it wasn't as exciting. I could feel this like still like in conversation. And later on that night, I think the combination of those two experiences clicked for me, that technology, I kind of expect technology to be able to do anything, especially nowadays. But to see another human being do something that I can't do still blows my mind. And it still fills me with emotion, and it inspires me.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is something about the human element. I was talking about this on the podcast the other day with like Rob Levere, Homemade Spaceship, which actually, you know him. He presented at the user group you were at in Denver.
Yeah, so talented.
He plays a lot of instruments, but we were talking about that, like the human expression, and how with AI and machine learning and everything, like really machine learning and AI is just built off of a model, right? And a lot of times that model is fed by human expression. I think in the end of the day, yeah, you're going to have AI that's so good that can create music that sounds very similar to somebody making it up originally. But I think instinctively, at least for a very long time, you'll probably still notice or have a different connection, I think, to something that's human, completely human made, or a human expression of a sound or a sample or just like a live recording of an acoustic guitar or something that wasn't modeled by artificial intelligence or a computer. That's just my personal feeling. And eventually it might get so good we can never ever tell the difference. But for me, subconsciously, I still think it's a different kind of energy. It's a different vibe when I hear something that's computer made versus like a human fully created.
There can be, I don't know if there's a term for it yet, but like the uncanny valley, that visual effect. If you see a representation of a human face that's not quite human, there is a point where you drop off in believing that it is a human face and in connecting with it as a human face. And it becomes this uncanny image. And that's like that valley where it peaks off, right? So there's a point for that in what you perceive with your eyes. I wonder if somebody's labeled how it feels to process that, because I've been in some live settings where there's human musicians playing to say like artificially generated voices, and the text is being generated artificially, and it sounds and feels cool, but there is this part of me that has the hair on my back of my neck standing up a
Yeah.
little bit, and I don't know if it's because I know what's going on, or something in the audio, or the lack of humanity still in the quality of the
Mm.
phrasing could be part of it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are there any like specific AI platforms that you are aware of that you think are kind of cool that are out right now or being developed?
Not really. I don't feel like I am as tapped in as a lot of people in AI
Mm.
and music. I do see AI's purpose in, like, I guess I lean into it to delegate
Mm.
tasks because I trust it for certain
Yeah.
things like that. I think there's a lot of potential for workflow
Yeah.
enhancements through artificial intelligence. And I know people are doing amazing stuff like, cloning somebody's voice and then somebody's lyrical style and somebody else's musical style and making these mashups. But again, to me, that doesn't, it's like, yeah, I guess it can do that.
Yeah.
But it hasn't had that shock value for me of like, wow, this is artificial intelligence and it's doing something that I can do. And I don't know, like, I don't feel that threat, I guess, that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, I don't see it as a threat. I honestly see it as like an added bonus. It's like an addition to helping you accomplish or reach an end goal, is kind of how I see AI being used, at least right now. Have you ever heard of UberDuck?
No.
I think it's uberduck.ai. It's AI vocal generator, and they sampled a bunch of like really famous artists. I don't know what it looks like with the royalties. It makes me wonder, like, if you have Grimes or like Beyonce or Rihanna's voice, like, do they get any kind of royalties or credits for that if you're doing text to speech or anything like that? I something.
I don't know, but I think if you release it, you'll find out
Yeah,
it's some
right.
from Beyonce's lawyer. I don't think they leave anything
Yeah,
unattended.
once you start making money on it, somebody's going to give you a call. I'm not sure about that. That would be interesting to find out. But yeah, UberDuck is kind of fun. I played with it a little bit. I think it's best, in my experience, in the limited time I've used it. It's better with like rap vocals or even spoken word. But
Mm,
they have over like apparently 100 million people using it right now. It's a pretty popular one when it comes to
no.
like any vocal generation.
It's making me think of the motivation behind making music, right? If you could say harness AI as an artist, if you are Beyonce and everybody's sending you
Mm.
demos, you could write a Beyonce demo using
Yeah,
Beyonce's
yeah.
AI voice, right? But then once you hand that over to the artist, it makes me wonder what would keep the artist from just releasing that AI demo if it gets to the point where it sounds exactly like them. I think that's where you go back to motivation. Why are you in music? If it's clearly just to succeed financially, which is a total valid path that like I try to find a
Mm.
balance in, then it's a no-brainer, right? Just get AI to do everything for you and you can manage your business from another perspective or like enjoy your family.
Yeah.
But I think some of us are interested in music because it challenges us and it makes us face these little obstacles that we create for ourselves at the end of the
Mm.
day, and we all find meaning in it of some
Mm.
kind. I think that's so valuable, and that's another reason why I'm grateful for people like you that put out educational content that's accessible for people that are curious about making music in a DAW. Because again, I see my 13-year-old self, and what would my path have been today? Well, like it's all at my fingertips. You
Mhm.
could just follow Dan and learn everything one video at a time, basically, or one interview at a
Make
time.
sure you hit that follow button on Spotify, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. Well, thanks, man.
Did we do it right?
Well, thanks, man. I agree. I don't think there's any excuses for anybody not to make music if they're interested these days, because there's so many resources available. And there's people making full-time livings on YouTube just cranking out tutorials, you know? Like, I
Yeah.
know there's been people on this podcast who has made some decent money just doing YouTube stuff, YouTube entertaining content or YouTube tutorials. I mean, there's so much out there. That's how I actually first learned about live for the first time was through DubSpot. They were the first, I think, school that
Mm.
really made live tutorials a thing on YouTube back in the day. And they had a lot of them because they had all their instructors making videos constantly. And that's how I found out about live. And I was like, this is interesting. And I decided to go to their school because of it. RIP, not really around anymore, but yeah, man, yeah, totally. There's a billion different resources at your fingertips today, and you have no excuses not to learn or to, jump in and try it because you can always learn how to do it.
I think they're all access points to your imagination. There's no telling. I mean, it's like unraveling the discovery of who you are as an artist. The more you learn, the more you start to shed the misconceptions of being an artist. And I think you can focus on the empowerment of being an artist and the beauty that comes with that empowerment of, because at the end of the day, we can create based on our own rules. I always like to remind my younger students, because they don't have, and when you're in your teens, you don't have a lot of control over your life. You're sort of living your parents' life and your school's rules.
Yeah.
But when you get put on those headphones, there are no rules. We can share some best practices and give you tips. But if you're making music, you have that ability to take a risk and have very, very low stakes because you can undo many, many times back and you can save as and you can experiment in the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think it helps people discover who they are once they unlock that process and what you can contribute, not only in a musical setting, but maybe in the music industry, for lack of a better term, or the music ecosystem. And I know that was my story. I didn't know I'd end up working for Ableton. I didn't know I'd end up helping people execute their live shows. I feel like it's a very unlikely story if I look at where I started, but it was definitely that obsession in chasing that thread and pulling that thread until more was revealed. And the more, what it revealed in me was I love helping people. I love learning and I love sharing that knowledge with others.
Yeah.
And it just became a no-brainer to focus most of my attention to the tools of music making. I'll say it that way.
Man, you're a great teacher. I've seen you present a few times, and I mean, you're definitely one of the best presenters I know personally when it comes to the Ableton Certified Trainer community or just people teaching live in general. Yeah, I always love hearing you speak.
Thank you for saying that. I feel very lucky that I feel like I'm doing my best impression of all the people I admire and all the people that I learned from. And then once I started getting involved in the Ableton community, seeing the caliber of dedication and attention to detail that a lot of user group organizers, certified trainers, user group attendees put into their presentations, and then seeing the art in presenting and the ability to express yourself, because it can be this very personal, you're sharing the process of making music and it's tied to a story. So it's also very narrative and revealing. So I really like all of those elements. It really feels like a combination of performance and teaching and just engaging on a, I wouldn't say one-on-one level, but on a personal level with a group of people. Because at the end of the day, everybody has to feel safe and neutral, like in a learning environment, in my opinion. So it's usually the way I see it, the responsibility of the presenter to set that tone and make people feel like, whatever thought you have moving forward, feel free to raise your hand and be part of the conversation. And that comes from me wanting to be also the type of teacher that I didn't have, because I grew up in an environment where teachers were still very, very strict. I went to Catholic school, lots of angry priests, lots of angry nuns.
I can relate.
And it's a great thing to rebel against. And I think this education and presenting is a fun way to not fall into those trappings.
Yeah, whenever I'm teaching a small group of people, like one thing I've liked to say in the past is like, feel free to ask questions. There's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people who don't ask questions. I feel like when I was at Dubspot in a class of like 9 people, I feel like I was the guy who was raising my hand constantly. I'm just like, hey man, this doesn't make sense. And probably was a lot of dumb questions, but you know, I've tried to be a sponge and learn everything because I look at myself now and I'm like, wow, I've learned so much and I've come so far. But like, I think one thing that's helped me be successful is not just only staying humble, but staying curious because there's always something new to learn and there's always somebody smarter than you.
Mm.
And no matter where you go, I feel like that's helped me get to the place of where I am of just being curious and having these interviews with people like you who are smart and know a lot of things that I can learn from. So that's one thing I love doing this podcast. And I think like it says a lot about you that you have a passion for sharing knowledge and teaching people, and that's one thing I think I've seen about all the Ableton brand managers is just that desire to really help people learn and to share knowledge and continue to grow. For sure, that's been my experience.
My personal education continued with people at Ableton, like Serafin Sanchez, who was my brand manager when I was a certified trainer, seeing him present, and then having the privilege of seeing multiple brand managers like Javad,
Yeah.
Buta present, and Thomas
Shout
Falls
out Thomas.
present, and Ben
Shout out
Casey
Ben.
present. Always, all of them. And like, you know, I sometimes can't believe I get to work with these people that I used to see and learn from as a member of the Ableton community. But they've been great in, and they've always been, even if I wasn't working at Ableton, they're great about sharing their secrets. That's what makes them great
Yeah.
brand managers. So that's why I say I'm always trying to do my best impression of all those folks, and I feel very fortunate to like be around them so that I can absorb their knowledge and their prior experience.
And I feel lucky to be under your umbrella now in this part of the country as Ableton brand manager for sure. So thanks for adopting me once again.
Yeah, don't go moving anywhere.
Well, I think I might have just bought a house today. So
Whoa. Is this an exclusive?
this is the
Podcast
first time
announcement?
anybody I've mentioned to it except for my mom. So
Man, congratulations, Dan.
it's an expense. Yeah, I'm in a lot of debt. So that's fun, but it's going to be worth it, hopefully. And I love Denver. So I'm putting down roots here. So come visit, man. Come over to the condo sometime in Lakewood.
We can bleep this out, but you said Lakewood? Okay, I was gonna ask where.
Yeah. I'm only 15 minutes from Red Rocks, which is a wonderful location. So I love being in the mountains.
Yeah, here you can go hike there during the day.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of activities at Red Rocks Amphitheater, and it's probably one of my favorite venues I've ever been to. So beautiful, and anybody who hasn't been, put it on your bucket list. Like behind the stage, you can see the city of Denver light up at night, and it's like carved out of a mountain. It's so beautiful, and yeah, they have a lot of people go there to work out during the day. They'll just run the steps because I don't even know how many steps there are. It's a great place just to like run steps and work out, and there's trails all over the place behind the stage or behind the amphitheater. So yeah, it's a really, really fun place to be.
There was talk of stopping, if you remember, when you, Seraphin, and I took a trip to the music district. And I think we talked about maybe stopping if there was time, but
Yeah.
there's never time for sightseeing. It's always like, I love those trips because it's just back to back, talking with amazing people and learning what people are up to.
Yeah.
And
you just need to find like 3 or 4 of those meetings, the people you're going to meet with, and then we'll all just go up into the mountains and you could just do your meetings in the mountains while you're walking on trails.
Not a bad idea. I need to learn how to breathe in that elevation. I don't know if did it hit you?
Oh, yeah.
Because Minneapolis is like sea level, right?
The elevation, yeah, it's barely above sea level. Yeah, Denver elevation's no joke. I mean, you'll see people selling those like CO2 cans or whatever they are.
I MD'd for a friend. We did a festival in Aspen, and it was really funny. They have oxygen, like hospital grade oxygen machines to the side of the stage. So in between songs, you can take a couple of puffs and be oxygenated for a few minutes.
I mean, that's a real thing. You'll see people like, that's why a lot of Olympic athletes train out here. Because the elevation is so high, you create more red blood cells in your body. And so then your body can breathe easier when you go back to a lower elevation. Like sometimes when I go back and visit family out east, like I'll just hit the treadmill and just feel like I'm Superman. Like I'll just keep going. I'm like, man, normally I'm dead after like 2 miles, but out here I'm like, let's go.
My first stop in Denver, that was that first visit when I did the user group. I stopped at a university right after getting off a plane and rushing and getting my rental car. It was just like back to back to back, set up, and 2 sentences in, I'm like, "What the hell is wrong with my
Yeah,
body?"
man.
Thought I was gonna have a panic attack. I was like, the
Oh,
dehydration
yeah.
kicked in, the lack of oxygen kicked in. I had to take a minute, take a sip of water before I could continue.
Get that smart water or get some of that alkaline water and chug. Yeah, you want to stay hydrated for sure. The first time I came to Denver, I had like 2 beers and like on an empty stomach, and I was like, man, I'm feeling a little spinny right now. This is crazy. So the elevation will get you too. Good times. Well, come back and visit me soon. I mean, we'll go up in the trails. We have to
Oh,
book a
yeah.
little extra time for that. But there's so many parks out here, and it's cool because for $29, when you register your car, you can get a pass to visit any park in Colorado. That's a good
Oh,
deal.
cool.
Yeah, they're awesome about that. This is the Ableton, music producer podcast, so we should maybe talk about some of that because I'd love to pick your brain on things related to music.
Yeah, I'm secretly trying to get your listeners to know more and more about your personal life throughout this podcast.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I really don't talk about myself much on the podcast, and I think part of
I
that's
know. That's why I'm here.
part of that's intentional too, because like I'm more interested in other
Okay.
people because I'm not that exciting, really.
I beg to differ, sir.
Appreciate that. So as far as like new updates that have been rolled out with Live specifically in the previous years, like what are some of your favorite features that you've seen? I mean, you're obviously a part of the company and seeing these features rolled out before they happen, and I'm sure you get all kinds of feedback from users all the time. Like what are some of your favorite updates that Live has released, say with like 10 to 11 or just recently?
The most recent one, as somebody that worked in education, I used to set up a lot of intro licenses. Ableton has a program called Ableton for the Classroom, where qualifying organizations like after school programs or even high schools can get free intro
Oh, that's cool.
licenses. And the purpose is, yeah, it's amazing. They're very generous with that. So as a certified trainer, I would just run into a lot of after school programs teaching music with a desire to teach music production. Shout out to Mark Turk in Austin, who really took a huge leap of faith in me when I was getting started in like educational consulting and helping people as a certified trainer. And we designed a program called at that time called Beyond the Grade that really leveraged getting those Ableton for the Classroom licenses. Anyway, back to the features. I'm kind of taking a long-winded approach to say how much of a game changer Drift is,
Yeah.
because back in those days, if you really wanted to get somebody excited about music production, it had to be all sample based. And as you know, working with synthesizers can be really thrilling. Like you can get a rush out of transforming a
Yeah.
sound or getting it to sound just the way you want. And in 11.3 a few months ago, we released Drift on all editions of Live, and that was pretty exciting. Although I feel like because it's included in intro, people assume that it was like an intro level device, but it has the same circuitry as analog,
Yeah.
for example, and the filters, and it was considered as a suite only device for a little bit, but it's such a game changer because now early learners and people that can't afford standard or suite also have access to a very powerful subtractive synth.
Oh man, it's amazing. It has a very analog sound. It's a lot of analog qualities just with the slow pitch deviation between oscillators. It just has a really unique character, and it's always going to be just slightly imperfect in the right way with it drifting in and out of pitch, hence the name Drift. But yeah, and the filters on it sound incredible. I think Mark Mosier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Mark Mosier mentioned something about the filters were almost kind of modeling a little bit of a Moog type of filter.
Well, I think what he might be referring to is that if you hit them hard with gain, they get that thick sound associated with the Moog. And that's how it's a little bit different than other synths in Live. But if you start playing with the gain, you'll see the waveform change. I don't know if you've noticed that. And you can really drive the signal before it hits the filter. And that's something that a lot of people associate with Moog.
Yeah, that fat, overdriven filter sound. I love it.
I mean, for bass sounds, I really like that you can go into the global settings page in Drift and then add that thickness when you're playing in mono. And I love playing that with that along with drift and just really finding a unique analog thick bass sound.
Yeah, same. Definitely. Yeah, I've always used my Moog Sub 37 for a lot of my bass synths, and I've been having a lot of fun with drift and just kind of forgetting it's there sometimes because I mean it's in the box. It's pretty easy to pull up, and I think it's really cool that it's included in intro. I mean, just alone, I mean, you think about some plug-in synths are costing plus $100, and you can get intro for how much is intro? It's like $100.
99, yeah. And if you're a student, you can get a very significant
Student
discount.
discount on top of that. So I mean, it's a no-brainer if you're anybody questioning getting into live or somebody younger who maybe has access to a computer who just wants to start playing around. I mean, just the drift alone, I think, is worth having a synthesizer, having that sound with all the other added features in intro too. It's a pretty cool deal.
You know, think of how much you can do with drift, simpler, and drum
Yeah.
rack.
Well, is drum rack included in intro?
Well, I guess I was just thinking of simpler and using like drums through
Right.
simpler. Sorry.
Yeah. I think Impulse comes with intro, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, you do get Impulse, which is
Yeah.
really fun and often overlooked.
It
but
is.
I like how you can drive the samples and shorten
Yeah.
them and like really manipulate it like a more of a groove box type of device than a drum rack. What is everybody asks like, what is your most used? What is your most underused?
That's a
Live
really good. I
device.
like that question. That's a really. I guess I'd probably have to pull up. Are we talking audio effects or instruments? 'Cause
Sure.
you can go either way. Because in your browser, you can turn on rank. You can right click in the browser header and choose rank. So I'll just do that. What is my least used audio effect? It looks like pitch hack and re-enveloper are my last two. What about you?
Let's see, I'm gonna have to put on my reflective glasses.
Yeah, please do that.
Back to see
Do that
this.
for my instruments while you're doing that. Looks like my least used instrument in live is tension, poly, and impulse. Those are my 3 least used. Tension's
Wow.
cool though, honestly. You can do some really interesting things with tension.
My least used audio effect is vocoder.
Really? Oh, okay.
And my least used instrument,
My least used MIDI effect.
tension.
Yeah, you and me both. Not a lot of tension going on.
Yeah. Even though I love tension, and it recently got a redesign,
Oh, did it?
which makes it really fun to play with. Yeah, you can. I think I was confusing it with. It's with Collision.
Right, Collision did get an update.
The other modeling. Yeah.
Yeah, Collision got a nice update. Shifter also got a nice update. I really like the update with Shifter. There's a really great tutorial done by Chuck Sutton. Chuck Sutton made a really great tutorial on Shifter that I would recommend people watch if they haven't used Shifter much for like any sound design or pitch bending and just weirdness. It's really, really well done.
Amazing educator too, and
yeah, I love Chuck. Super nice guy. Really talented producer.
That's sort of going back to your earlier question about learning in this new environment. I think that's what's really exciting too. So many people started to pay attention to that being a viable thing that people wanted. They either started a YouTube channel or they created content for their existing job at a school, or then even better, like they created their own programs that didn't exist and opportunities that didn't exist before. And I feel like it is such a great ecosystem right now, even though it can be confusing, even though it can be overwhelming, even though there's infinite opportunities. I think if you learn like the discipline of discernment and of like keeping context from all of these learning sources, it's such a fruitful time to be discovering who you are as a musician and to continue to discover who you are as a musician.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's no excuse not to have inspiration when it comes to making music, because you have like Discover Weekly on Spotify where it's feeding you all these new songs based off of your interests that you've never heard before. And you've got all these YouTube creators who are cranking out really interesting workflows and ideas. Like, you know, I hear people talking about staying inspired and I'm like, you know, I understand we all get in our own weird headspaces. That's just part of being human. Like, that's normal. But there's so many ways you could stay inspired, even if it's just riding your bike and going out on a beautiful day and getting outside your studio. You know, like there's a billion ways with the internet to stay inspired now and to be motivated to create if you just make the time, you know, and you can make the time. It's just might not be as much time as you want. That's how I feel.
Do you remember how everybody said that the pandemic accelerated things?
Yeah.
or like things that were going to be inevitable or whatever. I do think that technology and the speed that which our society is moving in has that effect of making like the actual problem or the real thing that's the issue really reveal itself quite quickly if you're paying
Mm,
attention. And I think that with music technology, it really is turning the lens back into the human behind the
mm,
technology. And it's funny realizing like my realization that arrangement view and session view are like basically the same thing. But for some people, it is night and day, and they could never fathom composing one or the other. And all it is that time is sort of like flipped on its
yeah.
side. You're still tethered to time, but not a
Mm,
timeline, which is like almost like a very obvious representation of time, right? It starts and it
mm,
finishes. But even like with push coming out lately and people not wanting a computer on stage, but then now liking this computer on
yeah.
stage, and push is a great controller for live, but there are certain things that if you want to map a specific button to a foot pedal, you do need an external
Mm,
thing, right? So then that begs the question, well, why don't I just use my computer if I'm going to be connecting external things to push? And it's like, yeah, that is a really good question, because at the end of the day, I feel like they're all the same obstacles. No matter what we throw at the market, no matter what amazing technology is given to us, at the end of the day, it's up to us to decide to make something with it,
mm,
and the limitations that come inherent in that instrument. I think that's what's made music the fun challenge and art the fun challenge that they've always been, and also such a dicey choice, right? Like, I have so much respect for my friends that choose music as a path, like as a life
mm.
path. And I have huge admiration for my colleagues and friends and people like yourself that have made a life, and like you're making really like fun like life moves, or there's like this growth in your life that is happening as your growth in music is happening. And that's so cool. Like, that to me is a healthy manifestation of what music is, versus the two choices I had growing up, which was like make it or don't make it,
Yeah.
and like live in shame or live in glory. And it's so relieving that we can have what used to be this gray area in between. We've like ourselves, everybody just took a little flashlight and shed a little light in that gray area.
Yeah.
And now it's almost fully illuminated. And there's this like very inviting path. Like, we still have a long ways to go in helping everybody feel, like they can come and join that path. But I feel like it's illuminated more than ever, definitely.
Wow, man, there's a lot of wisdom bombs in there we could unpack. That was really good. Yeah, I'm just sitting here soaking it in. For sure. I mean, you talked about limitations and like having a make or break moment. I feel like I felt that for sure, where like, during COVID, for a lot of certified trainers, and some of it was their, full-time job teaching. And it's like, how are we going to survive? Well, then I got really good at teaching online through Zoom. I had to learn how to do that to bring in extra income through lessons. And Ableton was super generous about supporting certified trainers through that process, and helping us, teach or do gigs at certain places online. Super grateful for that. And yeah, sometimes when you're backed into a corner, like that can be the best thing for you, because it forces you to get better, or to approach it from a different angle and like push through and just become better in general at whatever it is to actually reach your goal or get to where you need to go. I've heard a lot of stories of artists who are like really well-known artists now that it was like a make or break moment for them. They're like eating Cheerios and sleeping on a couch for like a year, just grinding on music until they got a break, and then it took off, or whatever that scenario is for anybody out there. But yeah, life is interesting.
And if you're barely hanging on, keep hanging on, because it should be a part of your life, right? And I'm not here to tell people what that life should look like or how it should manifest itself, but we have the option of finding a balance, right? No matter whether I worked at a bank, which I did, or in insurance, which I did, and all of these other jobs that had nothing to do with music, I knew that my relationship with music was
Mm,
unbreakable. I remember the moment, I remember the feeling, and I remember wondering if it was a cop out, if I
mm,
was just like not pursuing it. And in hindsight, there is something to be said about being the tortoise in the race. We all want to be the hare, and we see a bunch of hares, right? And on social media, and they get exalted, and it is a big deal, right? To be that successful that young. and to have that much attention that young. But there are other paths, there are other races, there are other things and it doesn't even have to be a race. There's other things going on where I think as long as you keep your eye on what's important to you, and I'm making it sound easier said than done because life is very hard and full of challenges. But to me, music was the solace during all those challenges.
Yeah.
Like being able to sit in a dark room with a guitar when I just needed to shut the world down and just focus on something beautiful. And it can do that. And I think sometimes we force it to be more than that. And it's great because it can be a source of income and it can be a source of success, depending on how you measure it. But at the end of the day, it's just inherently beautiful. It's just this thing that we can enjoy on its own.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think for me, music is therapy in the end of the day, whether it's a full-time gig or not. Like if I wasn't getting paid at all to make music, I'm still going to do it, you know? And I'm really not making that much off music anyway. I'm doing it for the love, you know? Even if somebody paid me a ton of money to do it, I'd still want to do it in the way I want to do it because I'm not doing music for money or for the fame or whatever else that could come with it potentially. But I think the people that are most successful, however you define success, are the people who just do what they love and they're not trying to force themselves into a box and creating music for the sake of trying to be something that it's not. And they're just doing it for the love. And I try to keep that mentality and like, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to make a track and it might be absolute garbage to everybody else. But as long as I'm having fun doing it and making it, then I'm fully satisfied, whether it becomes a banger or not, you know? That's how I try to keep that in mind.
And shout out to all the people with like jobs out there that are also making music. Some of my favorite and most memorable private clients as a trainer were like lawyers and doctors. And I remember a dentist had a studio set up in his back office out of his private practice. So I'd show up, it was like 40 minutes from my house, and I'd show up at like 10 p.m. after he finished doing all of his things. And he just wanted to record songs for his wife.
Oh, that's cool.
And I just thought that was the coolest. Like nobody was ever going to hear them other than his wife. But he was this person with a very full life, very, very full life. And he had like 3 kids and he would play tennis and ski. And he also wanted to do this really well. And I just remember that experience made me appreciate that there are a lot of nooks in different lives that music can fit into. And it doesn't always have to be like, you know, when I say I'm a musician or you're a musician or think of a musician, you think of like an all or nothing situation. But again, there is this beauty of music where you can take it and fit it into all of these other scenarios where it typically you may not suspect that it can fit. Have you ever had clients like that or students
totally,
like that?
man. I had a client who I'm still convinced he was in the mob.
I think I might have taught them too.
The thickest Italian accent, like the nicest guy, but it's like one of those guys, he's extremely confident. I don't know what he did for a living. He didn't really disclose that. And I asked him several times. He was like talking to me about, if we can't solve this online, I'm just going to fly you out to California. I'm at my 5th home right now. I was like, okay, cool. This guy was bawling out of control, but he was from New York and he owned a couple of restaurants there. And I'm like I was just picking up mob vibes. Yeah.
Ordering like synth left and right, fully stocking a studio.
He was just like, what do I need to buy? I was like, well, I mean, you're just starting out. You don't need a lot. Like, let's be honest. He's like, no, just tell me I'm going to buy it. Just tell me what to get. I was like, okay, laptop, software, keyboard. And he was like blown away. He's like, no, what else do I need? I was like, you don't need a lot. This episode is sponsored by Magic Mind. Honestly, I am obsessed with this stuff. I take it in the morning, I take it before a workout, I take it before I do a podcast now. It gives you all the mental clarity and focus you need without the anxiety of chugging coffee or any other energy products out there that are bad for you. You might be wondering, Dan, why would I need to spend my good hard-earned money on an energy drink? Well, it's not just like all the other crap out there. It contains 130 times the antioxidants of regular green tea. I actually gave a giant box of it to KMG Studios, where I'm doing in-person podcasts now, and the box didn't last long. A lot of the artists, a lot of the engineers love it there. One little shot gives you a perfect combo of nootropics, adaptogens, functional mushrooms, and includes ceremonial grade matcha, as they call it. It also can decrease inflammation, it supports a healthy immune system. You can take it alongside your coffee or your tea if you're a coffee addict like myself, without giving you that extra jitter or making you feel anxious throughout the day. I can think more clearly, I can be a lot more productive whenever I take this little energy shot. Magic Mind is backed by over 240 scientific studies designed to boost energy, enhance focus, and create a sense of calmness and alertness. And it probably will be the best part of your morning ritual or any other moments where you need that extra boost of focus and memory and energy. Definitely check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It actually tastes good too. Just go to magicmind.com/Ableton. Use the discount code Ableton20 in all caps. That's Ableton20 and save 20%. Highly recommend this stuff. I'll be taking it all the time. And yeah, I definitely recommend for you as well. So give it a try. Go to magicmind.com/Ableton. Check out the link in the show notes for more details.
I want to double click into that because that is one of the hardest questions to get. Because as somebody working with an artist, the last thing I want as the answer to be is spend more money. And it's so hard. That is something that is very present to me working at Ableton and working with artists and having the background that I had. I think you can really, really get started with just a laptop and headphones or a tablet and headphones or your phone and headphones. My advice is always buy gear as you need it, more so than, instead of prescribing what are the 5 things I have to have. It's like, well, I don't even know what kind of music or how you learn. So let's figure it out. And I wish sometimes people had a little bit more patience, but I think that is a symptom of society just like offering everything in this like 5-step process, click here to reveal the 5th step kind of thing. But how do you handle those situations?
I think everybody is a little different depending on their goals. I've worked with people who wanted to perform live and they did need some extra gear in order to pull it off, So I think it's a case by case basis depending on what you're really trying to achieve. But I think for the average person, I mean, I've heard Mr. Bill talk about on his podcast how he's like literally sold a lot of his synths because he just likes working in the box, and it was sometimes like prohibiting his workflow because he'd have to go and like patch stuff and whatever else, and it's fun, but he's like, in the end of the day, it didn't help me make more it didn't help him finish more music, I think is what he said. Yeah, I mean, I think it's dependent on the person.
Something that you wrote about, can I tell you about my certification story?
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've shared it publicly. It sort of comes full circle with a lot of the topics that we've been talking about. So one of my crossroads that I faced was after I saw all of the people that inspired me in the Ableton community, how do I join? And it just so happened that it was somewhat, I guess, maybe early days of my awareness of the certification program, but there was definitely not as many certified trainers as there are now, which isn't a huge number anyway. But I remember Brian posting about his certification, and that's how I became aware of it. And I applied, and I put a lot of intention and work behind it, and I didn't get past the first round. And it was a reality check, and I was sort of expecting it, but it still hurt. And soon after, I got an email inviting me to Loop 2016, which was the second Loop event. And for those of your listeners that don't know, I'm sure it's been mentioned a bunch of times, but it was an Ableton community, a global Ableton community event. It was a summit for music makers. And the last thing on anybody's lips was Ableton products or selling you anything. It was just Ableton opening the doors and letting everybody meet in the same space and learn together. It was like, looking back at it now, I sometimes wonder if it's like my Woodstock. There were 4 of them, 3 in Europe and 1 in LA. And I have so many amazing stories and connections, and every person that I talk to about those events feels the same way. But anyway, I got invited to that Loop event. It was a big ask. Like I to go to Germany to just go to an event when I was trying to like start my freelancing career was a hard choice to make. And my partner really encouraged me to do that. Shout out to Danny. And I remember just like having the intention of wanting to meet people, understand this community, and learn more, because like, how could I get involved? And it was almost like a very serendipitous. I sometimes call it like a Forrest Gump type of story, because everywhere I went, I kept running into people that in hindsight, I was meant to meet, or it was just very serendipitous that I did meet them. A lot of them certified trainers, a lot of them working at Ableton, and just got to pick their brain about their, like almost like had my own mini podcast with them about their career and their background, how they got involved with the company. I even saw Robert Henke from
Oh,
very
cool.
far away in the big room, and I like weaseled my way over there and asked him how I could get involved. And that's another thing in hindsight. He gave me a very like Robert Henke, like abstract answer about like not worrying about ending up there, but just doing my thing. And through doing my thing, it will be revealed, right? Like very esoteric. And, but it made sense to me. And I really appreciate that he said that, because that's how I kind of proceeded the whole weekend. And on Saturday, this was like the festival took place a little bit outside of Berlin in an old radio station, and people would take buses back to the city at the end. And I saw that group going into the buses, but I saw all these faces that I had met, like certified trainers and people that worked at Ableton, going up to this penthouse in this separate building. So I thought, hey, there's maybe a breakout event, or like something's fun's happening there.
Yeah.
Let's check it out. And I get there and I immediately notice that it's all Ableton employees and certified trainers. And I'm not opposed to like sneaking in or being where I'm not supposed to, but that felt like, I don't know, it felt like I have had so much admiration and respect for the community that I didn't want to be a person that overstayed my welcome or overstepped those boundaries. I can't remember who I was talking to. I told them out loud, hey, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to take off. Immediately after that sentence finished, from over my shoulder, I can hear it to this day. Dennis Fisher, who ran the program, said, it's okay. It's okay. You can be my guest.
That's so cool. I love
And I'm
Dennis. Shout
never
out to
going to forget it.
Dennis.
I
Such a
love
nice
Dennis
guy.
too. Shout out to Dennis forever. Dennis Fisher, who does a lot of different things at Ableton, but primarily at the time, he was also managing the certification program, and he really formalized that program and turned it into the rigorous process that it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I felt overjoyed. Long story short, everybody took a group picture, and I just kind of like, I'm not supposed to be here mentality. I just kind of went to the back and watched everybody huddle, and it just seemed like everybody was so warm and everybody was so excited to be in the same room together. I swear, Dan, I've never had this feeling before, but I've just felt this determination that I need to be in that picture. And I'm not coming back until I can be in that picture. And I've never set a challenge for myself like that. I'm not a deterministic person, but I don't think anybody had engaged that in me, where I wanted it so bad and I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know that I wanted it. So we ended up going to like a party after, and it was really fun. But when I applied, I felt like I could focus my presentations or my applications more into what I got to learn about the brand, and inspired by what other people were doing, and basically following Robert's advice of doing the thing without worrying about where it was going to take me. So I really lost myself into, at first, just being a freelancer and helping people learn to make music and to perform music. And then another certification came up in Mexico City, and by that time I had already been doing the work. I had been preparing my application because I had already applied once. So I was, I'd redrafted a lot of things and got into the first round. And then I'm not a straight A student. I'm a very human, make a lot of mistakes. So there were a lot of really like bumpy moments in that process where I thought, oh, I think that might have been it. I think I might have given them a reason to not bring me on. But I think I kept showing them my enthusiasm and that I was willing to continue to learn even when I hit those points. Long story short, ended up going to Mexico City the week after a horrific earthquake. So there was this very, very heavy shrouded like energy over the entire city. There had been a lot of loss, a lot of devastation. And in comes Dennis Fisher, and in come all of these certified trainer candidates from Chile and Panama and Colombia and like all of these different countries. And I was supposed to, they kind of shuffled us around. I have I have Mexican citizenship. So they were going to do all the Mexican candidates in one group, but because of the earthquake, they shuffled things. So out of sheer luck, I ended up meeting like all of these amazing Latin American CTs that I would have never gotten to
Cool.
meet and getting a taste for the communities over
Yeah.
there. It was a very challenging process. You know, it's 3 days of putting your knowledge
Yeah.
to the test and your dedication to the gig, to the test, and in a very supportive way too. I think it gets misunderstood as this like thing that's intentionally made hard, and I don't think it is. I think it's challenging. I think it's rigorous. But all of the information, as Dennis says, is in the manual. It's not a gatekeeper
Right.
situation. And I run into a lot of people that should be certified trainers. And I run into a lot of people that are already doing their own thing that want to be certified trainers. And there is, you know, it is a welcoming program, but it's also a very slow moving program because of the rigor. And to them, I always tell them what Seraphin used to tell me before being a certified trainer is you're already doing it. Like you're already part of the community, and that's such a huge deal. And I think as brand managers, we try to go out of our way to be that first responder in the user community, in the artist community, that in the educator community too, like the first line of communication rather, and always keeping the door open so that we can hear the members of our community out and not leave them outside of the, you know, just feeling like excluded or something. Because there's so many people, as you know, doing amazing stuff as Ableton users and just musicians and producers with technology.
That's a really cool story, man. I love your certification process and like everything you just said. I have a somewhat similar experience. I did not get through the first round when I tried to get certified. And, you know, and I asked Thomas Falls, I remember back in the day, and I was denied. You know, I went to him and I asked him, I was like, hey, like, what's the best advice you could give me as far as like reapplying or trying to get certified again? And he gave me a couple really good, like, quick tips. But, you know, one of the things that he said to me is, if you don't know something, that's okay. But don't pretend like you know it if you don't know it. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, you know, there's a few times where I circular talk when I actually don't know super detailed of what I'm trying to explain. And so I just spent a lot of time just like trying to go back through all the questions I remembered that were asked and just like do a lot more homework and go deeper. And, you know, what makes a sample rate a sample rate? Really going into the details and just nerding out real hard. And it forced me to become better and more knowledgeable. And then the second time I applied, I ended up getting through. But I love what you were saying about, you know, the process and Dennis, because Dennis was leading my group in LA when I got certified. And it was him and Ben Casey.
Very knowledgeable. Ben Casey is so knowledgeable about all things
He is
Ableton.
a fountain of knowledge. Yeah, shout out Ben. Also, just like the nicest person too. He's a really interesting person to talk to. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with him that was boring. He's one of those people that can talk about everything and knows at least a little bit about everything, it seems like. Yeah, Dennis was just such a nice guy, and it was so encouraging. And through that process, like you said, it can sound really, you know, intimidating and like you have to know everything in the world, but in the end of the day, it just made me more passionate about learning, and it taught me how to be a better teacher, which I wasn't really even expecting. It's just like it really taught me how to teach and really process my thoughts even better and explain it to others. And I'm Logic Pro certified as well. It was a complete joke compared to the certified. I'm serious. It was a joke compared to the certified training process with Ableton, which says a lot. Because it's not just like, oh, you're going to take this test and you check the boxes. Congratulations. It's like, no, like you really want to get to know who you are as a person because you're a reflection of the company as well.
And we do get that trust. Like as certified trainers, the brand is trusting you to basically be an extension of the company.
Yeah. So I have a lot of respect for that process, for sure, to say the least. But I think it's really cool and says a lot about Dennis being like, no, you'll be my guest, and like kind of brought you into that community and that circle. And, you know, I think in the end of the day, whether you're an artist or whoever or a plumber, like I think everybody wants community. And that's one thing I love about Ableton, not just as a company, but just the users It's like I can meet somebody on the street, or I go into a coffee shop and I see somebody working on Live. It's like an instant friend, like most of the time, just being like, hey, I use Live too. And then it's like, no way. And then you're buying each other coffee and you're hanging out the next week. It's just like, that's the kind of
Yeah.
community.
How many times have you been stopped wearing your Live shirt?
So many times.
And it's such an obscure logo, right? Like blink and you miss it.
It's so true, man. It's so true. What a cool thing, man. And I want to respect your time. I know we've been going strong for an hour and 40 minutes or so, but
I want to be mindful of yours too. I have no hard out, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, well, you can crash my time anytime you want. So yeah, looking forward to you coming back to Denver eventually, whenever that is. I did have a couple other questions on the list I'd love to touch on, just because I think people might be interested. We talked about some updates in recent years that Ableton has rolled out. I don't know if there's anything else there you wanted to mention, but also packs. I feel like packs are something a lot of people sleep on. And there's so many packs, and there's always new packs coming out constantly. And as a certified trainer, we always get that email being like, new pack. And it's like, oh, I still have like 200 other packs I need to go through. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any favorites?
I think I have a tip for packs. The tip for packs is not seeing them as permanent additions and seeing them as something that I always think of them as Christmas Day. Like you have a box and you open it and it's got a lot of different toys. But if you're very fortunate and your parents get you a lot of toys, all of a sudden they're not that special anymore. You don't get to play with them at the same time. They're all just there. You kind of get that fatigue of like deciding what to do. So I like to say, stick to one pack at a time. Start with the newest one. Start with one that resonates with your musical style. And then if you don't like it, delete it. If you don't have that much space on your computer, delete it. But if you collect all and save, you can have some of those presets linger around, or you can save that one preset and keep that around as your user preset. So I think of them as transitory experiences more so than, I don't know, because it just feels so heavy. Like, remember there was a time when you would get excited when somebody offered you a gig worth of samples. And I think Brian on his podcast said something once where he was like, man, that just stresses me out. And I thought, yeah, that stresses me out too, because I'm never going to use them.
Same. Yeah, I've had friends just dump 15 to 20 gigs of sound packs on my hard drive, and they're probably still sitting there collecting dust.
But I was going to say, as far as packs that I've enjoyed lately, for drums, I like DJ Newmark's packs. One of them is called Creme de la Crate, and just have some really useful drum rack for stuff that I like to do. They're just great for finger drumming. You can do a lot of different types of genres with them.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I haven't played with that one yet. So with the drum racks things and effects racks for your drums and other stuff, I love Chop and Swing. That's one of my favorites, especially if anybody makes like funky style, chill hop, whatever. Like that's a really good one.
I feel like Chop and Swing is like a modern classic in the world of packs, right? Like I just remember it coming in 10.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Unless I'm wrong.
There's also like one of the oldest packs that I'm aware of is like Instant House by Alex Kidd. Yeah. And it's just like it instantly generates drum patterns for you.
I ended up making that work in Push. I put it in you can't access the controls on Push, but if you map it to the macros of a group device or a rack, then you can have like at least the kick variation and pitch and stuff mapped to something. And it was fun having that on a standalone instrument and then just focusing on something else right away.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a good pro tip too for Push users. If you don't have access to the controls, just make macros, map them. Yeah.
Which made me wonder, I'm going to have to put on my glasses again. I feel like this podcast has aged me, my public appearance, because I'm doing this now.
Well, you look good in both. You're basically Superman. You're like Superman. When the glasses come on, you go into live mode, like technical Alberto mode.
I'm going to rank my packs.
Oh, that's a good idea. We should do that too. Let's rank those.
Wow, it's weird. I'm not getting any stats on rank.
You know what? I'm not either. And I know I use them. I have a couple of them saved to collections. I have Grain Scanner by Amazing Noises. That one's really fun.
Yeah. I was going to shout out Chiral. If anybody has like Max, if you're standard and have Max, or if you have Suite, you can get Chiral as a pack standalone. Okay. Oh, man. Sorry, that was so poor taste.
No, you're fine. Who called you?
I don't know. My laptop doesn't have caller ID. Let's see. My phone will tell me, and we can shout him out.
You just want a vacation.
Unknown caller from Sacramento, California.
That sounds really important. Should call them back immediately. Lo-fi hip hop by a Coma Kid is another really good one. I love that style. I have that one saved as well. There's Pitch Loop 89. Maybe we should mention that. That's
Pitch Loop 89. Yeah, it's funny. I think it's part of my sends now in my default set
because I idea.
Love putting it. I think I did a thing with it when I presented this last time in Denver, where I put it on Darren's sample trombone. Yeah. It makes everything sound so rich, and you can get textures and trippy sounds and a little bit of everything.
It's modeling that analog.
I think it's a rack-mounted digital tape emulator.
The Publison DHM 89. Yeah, it was inspired by that. The Publison DHM 89. You can create some really cool pads out of it. I've taken just like random samples of vocals or whatever and just stretching it, get like almost kind of a granular sound.
Now that I'm playing with MPE pads on push, all of the Spitfire instruments work really well. And they're like a really good instant way for you to experience expressivity. Because it was hard for me to like wrap my brain around what expressivity meant in a controller. And then it's like, it makes it click. Like just like a violin, you can play each note differently, basically.
Yeah, I could definitely see the Push 3 being really solid for the Spitfire stuff. The string quartet.
Do you use Inspired by Nature?
Yeah, Inspired by Nature is fun by Dylan Bastian. Yeah, he's on another level.
I like bouncy notes as like a delay because you can use it very chaotically too. I like generating drums and dialing it into where it's like you can get very usable drum patterns sometimes, and you can use it as a note echo.
Interesting.
Really cool, just like note delay.
That's cool. Yeah, I really like Tree Tone from Inspired by Nature. That's a really fun one. Or bouncy notes.
Sometimes I just like to sample those initial like the ramp ups. Those are the funnest part of Tree Tone.
You should just record yourself singing that instead. I think that sounded really good.
Well, it's out there now. Make that the anchor Instagram
Please
post.
Somebody sample that just now and make a track and send it to us. That'd be amazing. Any other packs that come to mind?
Off the top, I'm really bad at off the top of my head.
Fine.
I have to do my old man thing. Oh, Slink devices.
Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't played much with the Slink devices.
Really? Oh man, Slink, the MIDI sequencer. It's based on just the shape of different shapes of waves. So you can get into very typical straight sequencing, and then you can add these almost like Dylan stuff, like these laws of nature, but these are more, think of it as like ripple effects on a wave. So if there was a wave traveling through a wave, how would that modulate a parameter? Okay. How would that like trigger notes? So one of them in the sequencer, one of the modes, you have a threshold, and you've got 16 steps. And as the wave is moving, it's moving these, they're like, I guess, like circle indicators of where the threshold needs to pass to activate that step. So then you create these different waveforms, and it's very rhythmic, very interesting. Also, the filter in that pack is incredible because it uses, also a very interesting shapes of waves to modulate the position of a filter. So it's almost like you've got an EQ8 with LFOs on each of the bands.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm looking at this right now. I haven't played with this. I'm looking at the filter right now. Yeah, you can like really get some crazy modulated waveforms. Interesting.
Yeah. I think I've always been drawn to rhythm as my main thing, like even in guitar, like rhythm guitar versus more melodic things. So I really gravitate towards devices that let you introduce rhythm on top of things that may not have it.
I recently discovered Drum Glitch A and B. They're both presets of Pitch Loop 89. And like if you throw that on a return track or if you just throw it on the insert, just automate the dry wet, just out of the box. It gives you some really cool, glitchy, weird sounds. Yeah, that's a fun one.
I need to get better. I really enjoy getting a default instance of anything and then building from there. I guess I need to get better at curating my presets. I don't know if that's key for you to find them, or do you build them and then
that's part of my collections. I have like an effects collection color, And so I'll just jump there and just grab it, just throw it on real quick.
What's your effects collection color?
It is, well, I'm colorblind, but I think it's orange.
Are you like really
Yeah,
colorblind?
I mean, like pretty colorblind. So much so that I noticed
Okay.
a significant difference when Live 11 was released because they included an option that was reduced automatic colors, or what was it? What was the actual
Oh yeah, there's an accessibility setting now.
a setting that helps people who are colorblind? It like differentiates the colors a little more, so it's more obvious, so they don't look the same with similar shades. And I noticed a major difference.
That's something I think Ableton's doing a really good job at in getting it right. And I hear a lot of people making music with accessibility needs, and
Mm.
little changes like that go a long way. I don't know if your user experience improved or if it was just a different version of the same after that.
More of a different version of the same. It didn't really change much how I used it. It was just like quicker to see the differences between the color palette and devices. So yeah, it was a nice little upgrade.
I've gotten to talk to blind music producers.
That's interesting.
And learn about that process. And I've just been humbled by the amount of information that I didn't know. So the most impressive, I talked to this person named Devin Gutierrez here. There's a large school for the blind here in Austin. And the way I was introduced to the faculty, member of the Ableton community, Lacey Lewis, teaches there, and invited me to talk to some of the faculty and one of their students. And it was incredible. So Devin, we were in a patio, feet from traffic and all of this like street noise, all the time having a conversation in person with 3 people on the phone on speakerphone. And he was explaining to me that he can take, like the audio, just like if we call it a signal of the traffic and exterior noise, and bring that down in his virtual mixer in his mind and just focus on the very, very quiet speakerphone and bring that into prominence in his awareness. When he makes music, he'll hover over a track and it'll say track 2, muted, and then the level and the pan, and it'll say it verbally. And he has the ability to cancel that out and just understand the information that he's processing while focusing on EQ moves, compression, like very, very sophisticated production techniques. And not only that, the speed at which he hears those prompts as he's become more proficient, the same way your literacy, your reading rate would improve. He listens at like, I think 6 times speed or 3.5 times speed. So his prompts don't make sense to me, but they make him very efficient because he can really quickly hover through and receive a lot of really important
That's
information.
so interesting. So maybe I completely missed what you were saying, but you were saying like as far as navigating the screen of the computer or whatever, you're saying it's prompt based?
That was part of the learning experience. We're trying to catch up with a lot of these features. So he uses Reaper because for him it was easier he has to install a script that runs with Reaper that harnesses the power of the Mac's, his Apple's text-to-speech function. So it sort of bridges the UI. So every time he hovers his mouse over a track or over something, we get visual input. We see track number 3 and the button's yellow, so it's on. His software has to verbalize that to him so he can find out where he is on the track.
Interesting. Wow.
And so he's hearing that because it has to be auditory. He can't see that information. So he's listening to that as he's mixing.
Wow.
So imagine everything that you have to process visually, a seeing impaired or blind producer has to process auditorily most of the time while they're focusing on the music that they're making.
Wow. I mean, it's so cool though that we're in an age now where technology can assist them in doing that. I don't know if this is actually true, but I had somebody tell me once that if you lose one of your senses, there's a good chance that your other senses will be more heightened. So for instance, if you lose your sight, there's a chance that your auditory response, like your ears will be able to pick up frequencies, you'll be more in tune with your surrounding than you would if you were using your visuals, like your visual senses.
Shout out to all the groundbreakers that are developing these scripts and that are hacking into software and that are teaching companies like Ableton a ton of how we can do better. because, as you know, different backgrounds, different life paths influence different music in so many different ways. And music is an auditory form, but here we are like looking at a screen and everything has to like even look exciting, right? Like, I don't know if you get that input from students of like the devices in live. They all look uniform. They're all like very efficiently designed to operate so they're not taking up your video card's
Yeah.
power, right? But if everything had animations and different colors, it just becomes another set of problems. But learning how people are just, somebody like Devin who just uses their listening
Yeah.
and really leans into their listening, it really made me appreciate that the different walks of life that music can come from and how,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know about the senses being enhanced, but that is, I can definitely see, your focus going there and like your cognitive resources all being invested in what can give you that input that you need.
Yeah, it's really interesting, man. That's so fascinating. I actually lived next to somebody when I was studying at DubSpot in New York who was blind, and it was interesting seeing him cross the street without any help at all. Because he had a cane and he would just tap his cane on the street corner and he could hear reflections whether or not he could cross the street. And if there was anybody in front of him or behind him as he was walking across the street, he would just tap the ground and he could hear the reflections of frequencies around him, which was just kind of like, it's like magic to me. I was
Wow.
like, that's amazing. Yeah. Pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that Ableton is entertaining that idea of like, how can we help people who maybe have different needs than your average producer because of that, who maybe can't see or whatever, and giving them the possibility to still make music. I think that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, and I didn't want, just to clarify, I didn't want to share that as like, look at all the good we're doing. I just really thought, it was an interesting path that my job took me to. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm really grateful, again, coming from an unlikely background, to get to talk to so many people in the music community. And that's why I don't take it lightly. I really try to be that conduit and relay that information to the right people
Yeah.
at Ableton. And I was happy to connect Devin with one of our accessibility experts, and I know he's going to have a ton of input to share with us.
It's exciting. It's not like you tooting your own horn or anything. I didn't see it like that at all. It just shows, the innovation of like continuing to try to bring music to all people, which is really dope. I love that. We didn't really talk much about musical guests, and maybe we can like wrap this up, but yeah, I would love to hear like what's the future of musical guests.
Thanks for asking that. I think earlier on you were asking about the origin, and it's very simple. I wanted to put all of the music things that I want to do into one category, and the umbrella is sort of helping musicians. And musical guest came from it's sort of like a cheeky play on words. I like the idea of like the musical guest being called musical guest at a show. And just like the confusion
Nice.
that would cause, or on a bill, or sometimes when I go to like a South by Southwest conference, I'll use that and it's like, what?
So who is it?
But you're not playing. Yeah. But, honestly too, that music, I do believe it's this like transitory experience that, we can come up with it, but sometimes we do just channel it, and it's this guest that comes through us, and like really exploring the potential of that guest. But anyway, so that's the brand, and used to focus more on education and lessons, and I really haven't had a lot of time now that I'm full time at Ableton, because you really have to dedicate a lot of time to teaching or creating those learning programs. And also, I would hate for it to be a conflict of interest with the people that I serve as an Ableton brand manager to like compete in that world. So I've sort of still have people that call me up, and people that I used to work with in the past that I've continued like a teaching relationship with, and that's a lot of fun. But what I've mostly focused musical guests on, and just sort of happened organically because I wanted to learn to perform with technology. And I was lucky enough to be part of Laura Escudet's first master track workshop,
Did
which
you tell
I
me
know you
that? I
attended,
think
right?
you might have told me that.
Think we might have talked about it, but we've had so many like very brief encounters where we talk a lot
That's
about a
true.
lot of stuff in a short period of time. Again, being a fan of her work and being aware of what was going on at the time, the writing was on the wall. Like, you couldn't perform this music, and people were very eager to see it performed live, and the artists were very eager to take it. And I was doing Ableton live sets that I sort of stumbled into on my own. I had an 8 output interface that I, at the time, was reamping. So I would just play a bunch of instruments directly into live and then play them out to amps. And that was my live performance. Was like, I was chasing sort of that like old school, like everybody's playing in the room and it's all coming from
That's cool.
amplifiers, but still recorded from the same person, running sort of like a
That's
looper
awesome.
set. And I got to go to Laura's workshop. That was another selective process, and it was very rigorous. And that program was 2 weeks. I think it's since been narrowed down or concentrated into
Yeah.
5 days
Yeah.
or a week. And it was just so cool. It was another big decision, and being in LA for 2 weeks and away from home and my income, and but meeting, it was probably 80% certified trainers from all over the world, and really interesting people like Jeff Kaler.
Yeah, Jeff. He was there when I was there.
Created his own thing, Oaktone. Yeah, I think he was. You must have been the second year, and I think he came back because he was a great success story from that workshop. Like he was also already doing it. He I think he worked in worship too, which is a big avenue for.
Yeah, in Japan.
Yeah, so he had a lot of experience and a lot of answers, and I think he just hit the ground running. And he's a maker as well, a super talented and creative guy. And so he came up with Oaktone, and now a lot of playback techs travel with their Oaktone pedals. And just seeing a lot of those people from that workshop, DJ Huggy, somebody like I admired from the moment I met him. I'm sure he spoke at yours, and he's with Harry Styles, and such a nice guy. He like lots of great people anyway. And so I became fascinated. Like there was another investment in that workshop and like taking time to do this. So I was like, I need to recoup my investment. I remember coming to Austin and being really excited to tell people about like live performance and what you can do. And at the time I think the pandemic was the breaking point, but it was still like, nah, why would I want a computer on stage? I'm a folk band. I'm whatever, like an orchestral performer. And to them, it was still like breaking a rule or this taboo. But definitely finding people like my first artist that I collaborated as a music director was Lorena Lee from Dallas. And she was like just relocated from New York and she's having trouble with finding a band. And I think that's the story of a lot of solo artists that end up investing in tracks and a playback system or some sort of live solution, is the consistency of finding a band. And you can't, keep them on salary and motivate them to rehearse. Maybe each musician is like in 5 other bands and they're trying their best, but they're not as focused as the solo artist. And I found that introducing tracks to that mix was a great way to give them the power back, because it's a great way to keep rehearsals tight. It's an unforgiving band director because you can't, give the click any excuses and you can't talk back to it. It's this undeniable thing, whether you're on the train or not. So one experience led to another, and I started meeting more people in the playback industry. And when bands would come through Austin with a playback emergency, I'd help them out and got a couple of tour offers. And I've just been lucky to be able to work in different capacities. And what I'm enjoying now is helping people from the conception of it, where and that was my recent experience with Caroline Rose, who is crushing it on the road. I remember meeting her over Zoom, and we just geeked out about something she was trying to do with her modular gear. We just hit it off, and I think we had another conversation a few years later. And I try to just take people at face value. I don't look into people's careers or like what they're up to until they share it with me. And then come to learn she's working on this really awesome tour, and her previous tour had been postponed in 2020. So she had a lot of energy and a lot of intention and a lot of really cool ideas. And the process with her was sitting down at coffee shops and doing a lot of drawings. And is this possible? Is that possible? What if I wanted this or that? And I found a lot of joy in that. And I found the joy came from collaborating as an artist with the artist, and not just focusing on the tech and coming in with a solution, but being a person that showed them what was possible so that their vision didn't have to be compromised, right? Because so many times you have to compromise, and now you get the right interface, you get the right software, you don't have to compromise that much anymore. And then seeing that take shape into a really complex vision with a lot of moving parts, and pulling that off and seeing that go on the road and handing it off to her crew and her band and seeing them crush it, and seeing the reaction from people. really gave me that satisfaction of not only being part of the creative process, offering the solution, and then seeing it take a life beyond it, which sort of reminded me of an album release in a
Mm,
way. And it was very satisfying because, yeah, it's just like a peek into somebody's problems. And I was able to bring a solution that they needed at
yeah.
the time, and then seeing them run with it. Because it's like I try to remove my ego from
Yeah.
those situations and just really serve the
Yeah.
vision. And most of the time, people just need a little encouragement and a couple of, being pointed in the right direction or some
Yeah.
answers. And then you just enjoy watching them run.
I think that's really cool, man. There's a billion ways to do playback depending on an artist's needs. Some artists are definitely easier to work with than others. It's definitely kind of a fun puzzle to solve. I don't know, for me, like when I've helped people with their live sets
Yeah.
or their tour rigs, there's like a billion ways to approach it. Laura definitely has a really awesome system as far as how she works with her rigs, with electronic creatives. Yeah, I totally forgot. I spaced that you were in her master track too. She's super cool. Love Laura. She's been on the
Yeah.
podcast a couple times, and AJ and
Oh, yeah.
Greg
Great
and her
person.
team, all really good people.
You mentioned the like some artists being difficult. I just wanted to double click. I know I'm maybe
No,
going
you're
long a
fine.
little bit, but that's also something that I don't take lightly because artists have a huge weight on their
Yeah,
shoulders, and especially when they're taking the time to invest in a playback rig and trying something new and doing something
yeah,
risky, and all of a sudden this person who they may not have handpicked or just somebody comes in and they have to believe and trust that they're an
yeah.
expert and put the
In their
entire
hands.
show. I mean, not that because we're not taking the talent away from the band or anything, but we could ruin the entire
Right.
show, not if we didn't care. So I always take that as them testing how invested I am in getting
Mm,
it right. And I think part of the gig is being unshakable
yeah.
and knowing that you know how to make this work, but it's their show, and we're just kind of guests.
You're a musical
No
guest.
pun
Yeah,
intended.
exactly. That's true. Yeah, and I like what you said, taking the ego out of it, because in the end of the day, it's all about fulfilling the vision and the mission of the artist and trying to put on the best show you possibly can. And that's really what it's all about. So,
And then real quick shout outs to Will Doggett
yeah, Will.
and Spacebar in LA, because all of those folks have been part of my learning
Cool.
journey too.
Yeah, Will was only a couple of episodes ago. I love Will. He's got a great YouTube channel too. Shout out Will, where he does a lot of iConnect tutorials and live rigs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, he's really smart when it comes to the live show stuff.
And a great conversation. He used to live in Austin, so I had every excuse to take him out to
Nice.
lunch and just talk and
Yeah,
talk and talk. And I found out I had a lot in common with him right before he left. And I miss the guy. He's a really good lunch companion.
he's such a nice guy. Definitely a good person to talk with. Yeah, and he's another classic example of somebody who just quit his job and went all in. Right before COVID, I think it was like right before or during. He just went all in on YouTube and creating tutorials and classes and courses for people to learn that kind of stuff.
And providing for a family too.
Yeah,
He's a dad and he has fun with his kids, and it's really cool to see again somebody in music, right? I only mention it because it's really cool to see that you can have that life if that's the
yeah,
life you want as a musician
totally.
too.
Absolutely, man. So, what is the future of musical guests?
I'm excited to find out,
Okay.
honestly. I'm not a goal setter. I'm more of a discovery. Let's see what happens. Life has been, good and generous to me in that way. I've had my ups and downs, but in the end, I think like having that faith in my mom has this thing that she left me with before she passed. She said, I'll say it in Spanish because that's how she said it, and I'll translate it. But she said, "Nunca dudes tu buen corazón," and it means never doubt your good heart.
Mm,
And for whatever that means to anybody listening, to me, it just meant like I kind of already know what I want to do. I don't have to put it into words. And that's not to not give you an answer. I really like discovering where
mm,
it takes me because I think if I would have controlled my destination, Dennis Fisher would have been right behind me and I would have not gotten to talk
yeah.
to him. I would have maybe not tried a second time for the
Mm,
certification. Maybe I would have just kept music as a hobby. All of these things that would not have aligned for my goal. So it is good to have objectives. I like being a responsible person. I like, keeping a roof over my head, but I also like leaving a little wiggle room for discovery.
Yeah.
And maybe the last 3 years, I felt like I was gaining momentum, and I got to work with some really exciting people and work with tours at a level that I hadn't worked with before. And I feel like right now in my life, I'm just in a figuring out pattern, or I'm just kind of hitting a stride, and I'm open to seeing what happens and what's next. And I'm very excited when that's going to reveal itself and what that'll be. But definitely working with artists, definitely working in music and leveraging technology to help people do what they want to do in music.
That's a good answer. And I like that quote from your mom. I love that. It leaves room
Thanks,
for
man.
like discovery and just being open to all the possibilities in the future without trying to control every aspect of your life. Because obviously, we all know you can't control every aspect of your life. It's just not possible. Life doesn't go that way. So, like,
I tried.
for sure. I think that's cool. No, I love that. I also, I saw that you worked with, this is completely off topic, but I saw you worked with Imagine Dragons. Like, how did that connection happen? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can't remember how. I think they reached out to a few CTs in Austin. So Shane is one of their techs, and he was trying to get them from. I don't even say. I don't want to say what they were using before because I don't want to reveal what was going on. But they wanted to switch to live, and it was a big change. And man, though that crew is so professional. Like they just needed a little bit of information to
Yeah.
get going. I showed them how live would work in their type of environment, how to build some racks. And then, I advised them like, maybe have some rehearsals, try this out. They are so pro that they went on tour and kind of built the parachute along, they'd ask some questions and everything, but the show never stopped. And they definitely, it added efficiency to
Cool.
their show. It's an integrated stage, as you would imagine. Everybody has their own version of live running. A lot of people are running virtual synths off of computers. Some computers are just sending patch changes to pedals. But it was just a really cool experience seeing how dedicated a team can be, and how it was right in the middle of the pandemic. I got COVID. They came to my house, not the band, but the crew came to my house, and I set up a workshop for them here. And then I took a test, and I
Oh,
found out I had
no.
COVID. So then I had all their gear at my house, and so they had to like come get it back, and it was just like talking through windows, like all of that
Oh,
COVID
man.
bullshit. So it was not ideal. Like the plan was like more of a traditional like go on location and work with them that way. And we started doing that and then had to adapt, which is again why I like to be I like to have an outcome and stick to that outcome, but the way we get there is always a little different.
That's a great quote, man. Maybe we can end it there. I love that. Dude, it's always good seeing your face, man. Every time I see you, whether short or longer conversations, I always enjoy our chats. So come visit me in Denver.
Absolutely, and I will. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to be on the podcast and for being patient with me finding the time and working with my schedule. And this was really great. I don't know why I always have an idea of like podcast being a specific thing, but I knew coming into it this was just going to be a conversation with
Like
you.
I said, I love hanging out with people on the podcast that are my friends and that I already know. And maybe next time we could do it in person at KMG because doing this now.
That's a great setup. Yeah, I saw Rob's interview at KMG. That looks really slick.
Thanks. It was a whole learning curve. I've had to become a video person, and shout out to my friend Evan Payeth, who's a video wizard in LA. He flew in to help me with the setup. Such a good friend of mine.
Wow. If I can ask you really quick, what's next for you and Live Producers? And this doesn't have to be on the podcast if you don't want to share it.
So live producers right now, I have courses and stuff that I put up, and I'm doing my private lessons under that umbrella. Kind of like musical guests, like I would just feed you the same answer. I don't really know what the future holds for it. Right now, I'm spending more time just trying to close on this house and finish a couple tracks I'm working on. I've got a couple collabs. Focusing more on my own music because that's the therapy. And I think the last year moving to Denver, I've been super distracted with a lot of things. So now I'm just trying to like only focus mostly on my music and focus on the podcast and hanging out with cool people like you. That's my short answer.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, it's a good time. Well, yeah, like I said, come visit us in Denver. We'll do an in-person episode someday, and I appreciate you joining. Seriously, there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think people are going to dig it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Anytime, man. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Do me a huge favor if you would and hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. If you don't hate the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. It would help me out a ton. Don't forget to check back on Tuesdays for new episodes. I plan on cranking out a lot more in the upcoming future. Also, if you didn't know, on Spotify, if you click on an episode on mobile, you can interact there and you can tell me what you think about this episode and other episodes, and it would be great to hear from you and see what you're thinking about the podcast. If you want to be the first to get new episodes and stay updated and get free new devices and sample packs and other stuff that I'll be sending out in the future, join the newsletter. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter and or check out the links in the show notes. Make sure to give this guest a follow on the socials, give them some love for spending their time. And once again, thanks for listening to the podcast. I will see you next time. Later.